there was a guy who was our football coach. And I remember at some point I was like, I don't know, I had something coming up. I don't know if it was like, could have been an audition for that variety show or something where I'm like, I don't know if I'll get or a job. Mm-hmm. And I happened to share it with him. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, of course you could get it. And he's like, just assume any room you walk into, you're better than half the people that are going in there for that job. And I'm like, I kind of love that because it's not arrogant. It's not puffing yourself up that you're the best person in the world. But like, if you're of average intelligence and you're a good person, that counts for like more than half of the field.
Come on.
You're going to dress nice.
Yeah.
You care about people. Like those things are valuable.
Yeah,
and guess what? A lot of the candidates, they're not dialed into that.
You know how to say hello. You can listen.
Yes.
You can, right?
You've had a decent education.
Yes.
You can write well.
You're personable. You're pretty. You're 50% good looking.
Yeah.
At least 50% good looking.
Exactly.
I really
decent
like it.
facial symmetry. You're not unhealthy. You don't smell bad. Those all things build to have.
We live in a complex and ever-changing world, a place that is maybe harder than ever to successfully navigate. The answer is surely to be brave, but it's also to seek and be open to guidance. Mentors are the one consistent through line in the lives of all accomplished people, myself included. So welcome to Mentor Buffet, a feast for those, like me, curious about who helped the most successful among us succeed. Matt Walsh is a comedian and an actor. You might know him from Veep or the new movie Novocaine, or maybe my movie Not an Artist, where he played my dad. He also produced and wrote the movie with me. Matt founded the Upright Citizens Brigade sketch comedy troupe. I'm a full graduate of the curriculum and school he developed with UCB, and that's how I first learned about him. He was a mentor without ever being a professor of mine. In this episode of Mentor Buffet, we talk about the early stages of his career.
So after college, I was doing psychology for a couple years with disturbed adolescents. And then at night, I was doing comedy.
His peers in the comedy world as mentors.
I was living with 4 other dudes in a 2-bedroom apartment and nobody had money, but we were doing our own sketch show.
And how to approach things that are out of your control. I admire him and appreciate his honesty. He does not bullshit. Here's my conversation with Matt Walsh.
The first brush with figuring out what I wanted to do with my life was we did a comedy variety show in high school our senior year, and my friend said, we should do some sketches. And so we basically made fun of the teachers, and there was a woman there named Pam Baker who was the theater teacher, and I'd always been interested in performing, sort of a class clown personality, troublemaker, prankster. I identified with being funny, and but I never had the courage to get into theater. I'm like, I was an athlete. That's for artists, or that's silly. I don't know why. I was probably afraid of it.
You're a football player.
I played a little football. I wasn't great at anything, but I played a little football. Did gymnastics. We won our intramural floor hockey championship. No big deal. Anyways, Pam Baker was just encouraging. She ran the show, and at the end of it, it was really encouraging to write material, do it for an auditorium filled with people, get the laughs where you thought they were, and then afterwards get the praise and people oh my gosh, you're so funny. And that was very validating, obviously. And so Pam at the end of it was you're very good at this. You should consider, pursuing it. And that was very validating, but I didn't really pursue it. I went into a course of psychology in college and took one acting class and was sort of figuring out. And then at the end of my last year of college, a friend of mine told me that he had gone to Second City, and he said, you should do that. You'd be really good at that. They were doing sketches and they also teach classes. And so he's like, you should take a class. So I was taking classes downtown in Chicago and driving back out to my university for my last year of college. And I discovered improv through those classes. And that was the bug. So after college, I was doing psychology for a couple years with disturbed adolescents. And then at night I was doing comedy. And so I was going to grad school for maybe psychology, and during the day working with student or kids that were disturbed. And then at night I was doing sketch and improv. And then I eventually decided that psychology, the stakes were too high and it was very challenging. and it was more rewarding to do comedy. So that was my journey. Once I graduated college, I was living with 4 other dudes in a 2-bedroom apartment, and nobody had money, but we were doing our own sketch show. We had our own review and we rehearsed it. And so like a band, we were playing out. We were putting up our show, building an audience, and that was rewarding because we could test material and we had characters and the audience laughter and the attendance is validation. So you're on your way already in an art form like sketch or improv. The beginning entry to call yourself a sketch performer is very low.
And it's supposed to adapt and change, or it's supposed to be, if it's improv, like ephemeral, right? It's like it doesn't live again. And so it's interesting because you were talking about the psychology being like, it was a lot of pressure, it was high stakes, but maybe even just the environment of like, we're just supposed to like toe our way in and then just keep going with this. Like you just begin, right? And what a different way to like be in the world and also to be creative. Because it's so, I don't know, if you put on a play, it feels like you have to like make it perfect before it's performed.
Yeah, it wasn't traditional theater. When I got to college and living in Chicago in my little comedy ghetto with my buddies, we were directing ourselves. We would shoot videos ourselves. We would write sketches. We leased a theater ourselves. And then it was a little group called Department of Works, my first sketch group. And we just were up and running. And then we had a show and, you know, my parents brought friends to it. We put up flyers. You know, we hustled as much as we could. And then from that, there were these open mics in Chicago where you could do stand up or sketch, or you could do like conceptual pieces, a place called the Roxy. So now you're doing like open mics as a group or as an individual. So you're just playing out where you can and learning your craft. And then you make friends like your peers, and those associations turn into partnerships. So I remember doing stuff at the Roxy, and that's where I met Matt Besser, who later, him and I, you know, became members of Upright Citizens Brigade. But that was like when I was just trying to figure out what was funny and trying to do shows and things like that. So I think of, if you want to be, like, for your listeners, like if you want to be a realtor or a lawyer or I don't know, something with some sort of certification test or an accountant, there is like a bar exam, a CPA, a real estate license exam. But with comedy or even music, you just find people you like playing with and you just get up on stage and find venues and just start hustling. And you put things up before they're ready, which is unfortunate for the audience, but it's fortunate for you. And so you just keep trying to get better.
How do you take in feedback from the audience, feedback from peers, and balance that with like your own taste or ignoring feedback? How is that all working for you at that age?
I think a lot of the early days, it was just the sheer joy of like, oh my gosh, we're doing it.
Yeah.
It's like in high school, we're on stage and like, I can't believe they're laughing at our jokes. So a lot of it makes the sheer joy of being able to do it makes you bulletproof to the failures and the criticism. And then at some point you feel, either after the show, you talk to people you respect who came to the show, or peers who do things and go, that's really funny. You should tweak that here. Like comics might give a note about a joke, or I had a friend back in the day who was also, he had 2 lives. Everybody was doing 2 jobs. He was a very, very successful advertising guy, but he was also doing a sketch group, and he would give us notes, and he was really smart. And so I respected him, and he ended up directing one of our shows. So you look for those moments of expertise or people who are funny and telling you, you know, this could go that way. And then just the general feel of a bit. If something fails and sucks and is terrible, then you know, well, we got to throw that thing out whole cloth.
How does it feel when you've worked hard on something, you think it might be successful and it's not?
It's hard. It's very much, that's why stand-up is so much the hardest, I think, art form in terms of like performance, because you're there alone. And a lot of stand-up is just you. So if they reject the bit or the jokes, they're sort of rejecting you. You know what I mean? It's not like a character in a play. It's like, well, I was playing a Dickens character, and if they didn't like it, well, they don't like Charles Dickens. There's a protective distance. But if it's stand-up and you're telling your story, your jokes, and the audience rejects it, It's a little harder.
How did you deal with?
I dealt with it by being in the collaborative arts of sketch and improv. I did stand up for like a year or two, made money. There was a boom where anybody with a decent amount of jokes could get booked in Chicago, Wisconsin, and Michigan, that little tri-state area. So I was fortunate, and I would always bring my friends in and turn it into a sketch show because I wasn't comfortable on my own. So I always was more interested in bending the space, putting people in the audience or doing 2-person sketches, smaller sort of sketches on a stand-up stage. And characters. I always did characters. I always felt more comfortable playing a character like a clown who had been to Vietnam and would constantly break down and talk about his Vietnam experience. Stuff like that, like premisey stuff, yeah.
You use the word game, right? I feel like that's distinctly like of the world that you've like come up in. It's the world that you've like nurtured for others. Like I keep wanting to be like, Matt, like you founded UCB Theater. Like it's a big deal. And I mean, I'm sure you know it, but it's like, it was like a college that kids in college would have preferred be their only college, like it's a school.
It is.
And so you move from Chicago and you create this curriculum, this place to teach people what you had been taught. And what I'm curious about is, what about what you had been taught in Chicago, or we're nurturing, we're feeling the good feelings, the challenging feelings. What about it made you want to create something for where other people could learn it in a more structured way? Or what made you want to create something for people to learn?
I think sometimes, like in the theater world, you can take an acting class and a teacher might be like, "Oh, you're amazing. It's beautiful. You're so good." And they just sort of puff you up. And then you leave the class and you're like, "I don't think I learned anything." Like, so the curiosity and the compulsion to like give people takeaway was always in there for, me, Matt, and Ian, who wrote the book, Ian Roberts, Matt Besser. I think we always wanted to be valuable to the people. We didn't want to be bullshitty. We wanted to be real. So when we landed in New York, we were doing long form, and that was something nobody in New York was doing. It was like we had this magic trick, and people instantly connected with and wanted to know, like, how could you do those sustained scenes and those entrances and those edits? That seems like you had a script. So they were curious about what we had learned in Chicago. And we had sort of adapted what we had learned by doing it on stage for many years. And so we started teaching them. And then I just remember the initial classes were like Ian had like some exercises and some sort of sentences and how to build a scene improvisationally on a piece of paper that he had in his wallet. And we sort of all went off of that. And then as the four of us each taught classes, Matt, Amy, Ian, and myself, we each had sort of expertise in our own little area. And eventually... And by the way, we were building off of pre-existing improv exercises that had been taught folklorically and really hadn't been codified. But I remember in Chicago, I learned all these wonderful exercises that just expose you to environment or like yes and or like 3-line scenes. And they're fundamental practice scenes that teach you, how to listen, how to build on someone else's idea, how to focus on what's interesting, and how to sustain a comedic game or a comedic dynamic that will entertain an audience for a prolonged period of time. So as we started teaching, more things got written down. And I feel like I was good at always hearing what's interesting and listening and recognizing it doesn't need to be a huge premise to get a scene going, but something small that breaks the pattern. So I feel like a lot of what I taught people early on was just like, you don't need a lot right there. That's enough. Start with that, focus on that. And then how do you play that? If that's true, what else is true? That's sort of one of the basic tenets. And that's very Ian Roberts. He was big on that. And so through all of that, I think we just sort of, it became a book that we codified, which we spent 6-7 years on, which was like really mundane and boring. Writing a book, it's like putting together an IKEA manual, but it was worthwhile. And we took great pride in like giving people authentic takeaways so they could have that book and grow up in the middle of Idaho and maybe get their friends from school and go through some exercises together and start their own band, start their own troupe, and learn how to do long form.
And turn it into a discipline, right?
Yeah.
Like you turn something that was like you call it folklore, observation, or patterning that you saw that worked, and like grounded it in words and labels
and exercises
and exercises. Exactly. And I think that is like such a turning point for any craft, right? Is when it becomes a discipline. It's when there's vocabulary and there's a process, right? And there's an ability to step in and understand it and not just feel it and sense it and randomly hit it and not know why. There's a why in it.
Well, it's like rules, coming up for rules. Like you come up with sort of a rule, if you will, and then you think about it. And then there's this exception when you go through all the variations of like situations, and you're like, well, maybe that's not a rule. So then you have to change the words to the rule so it can encompass everything. And you do the best you can, and somebody will write a better improv book, you know, and a more relevant improv book at some point. But we were really struggling with terminology. Like, what is that called? That phenomena? What do you call that? Oh, that's based like simple beginning of an improv scene. Sometimes you're just establishing who you are, what your profession is. Where are we? What's our dynamic? What's our status? Are you high status, my low status? You're sort of fumbling through before you have a comedic dynamic. And that building that we I think we came up with a term called base reality. So you're building a base reality from which you can do a comedic scene. So once you understand the sort of environment you've built, relationship, status, then you might stumble into a comedic game or a dynamic where it's...
But that's not the start. I mean, that's what's so brilliant about it too, right? It's like the funny comes from all the foundation that you build, with the principles that you created. That comes first.
And the base reality is first, and then the comedic game comes from a break in the pattern. What's unusual? Find something unusual, and then teaching people to recognize the unusual, I think, is part of what we did, or part of what I did. Like, did you hear that? Like, that's not a typical response to what you just asked them. So follow that. Go train yourself. The discipline of improv sometimes is train yourself to pursue the interesting or unusual. And I think that's a lot of what the discipline is of improv.
And isn't that such a beautiful way to look at anything in life, especially when you're coming into Hollywood and it feels like people want you to be, you want to be like the usual, like you want to stand out, but you want to fit in. And so to be someone who's been trained and also is teaching people that the sparkle and the special thing is the unusual moment is such a different way to see the world.
Yeah. I think of actors I know who were kid actors and they worked a lot when they were young, and then they just walked away to have a life, and they went to college and they just lived their life. And I'm like, that's so smart, just to develop and enrich yourself as a human being. But ultimately, it'll probably serve your work on the other side of it too, because you're expanding your worldview and you're not replicating stories that you only knew because they were in scripts that were given to you from writers inside of shows. You know what I mean? So I think that's what life experience does. Like, especially in improv, you have to call upon, you know, you'll be given scenarios as like, you are a physics professor and this guy's a cowboy. And it's like, holy shoot, I do know a physics professor. I did college, I had one. And then I did go to a real cowboy place. So I have that in my knowledge, my knowledge base. So just exposure, travel, being well-read, all that stuff is helpful in being like a performing artist, I think.
Yeah. And it's nice to believe that your life is cumulative. I've been thinking about this a lot lately of like, was this a waste of my life? Or how does this add up to that? That has nothing to do with this. And it can be really disorienting and like really awful to feel like you wasted any bit of your life. But then I feel like I'm starting to realize and choosing to believe that it is all cumulative, and that everything, almost like our cells only know the feeling of experiences and they know facts, but like it does add up in ways that you don't understand.
All that life experience, give it value. Like assume that it makes you unique and that it is interesting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because a lot of times we sort of dismiss, I can speak to myself, we sort of dismiss our expertise or our journey or whatever. And you're like, I'm just average or whatever. But in reality, if you give it weight, or that's why you should journal, you should write, because it helps you kind of keep stock of what you're learning, and it reflects back to you like, oh, that is good, or that is interesting. And so it reminds you, of the life you've lived and the journey that has gotten you to this place. So I think recognizing that and giving it value is important. And I think you kind of talked to me earlier. One thing I remember, I had a high school I had good lessons in high school. People who validated me. I don't know if that's a mentor, but people who validated me. There was a guy who was our football coach, Coach Kerwin, I believe.
It's a good coach name.
Yeah, great. And a great dude. Great dude. Like a really good, like coaches, as you know, can be wonderful influences on young people. And I remember at some point I was like, I don't know, I had something coming up. I don't know if it was like, could have been an audition for that variety show or something where I'm like, I don't know if I'll get, or a job. And I happened to share it with him. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, of course you could get it. And he's like, just assume any room you walk into, you're better than half the people that are going in there for that job. And I'm like, I kind of love that, because it's not arrogant. It's not puffing yourself up that you're the best person in the world. But like, if you're of average intelligence and you're a good person, that counts for like more than half of the field.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And just confidence.
So it's kind of negative about humanity. Like there's a lot of messed up people in humanity. And so if you're average, you're actually doing better than most in a way.
Funny.
But it is like a kind of confidence you can carry that, like, just assume you're as good as half of the field for this thing that you're going in for. And I don't think that's an unreasonable assumption. And that, it gives you one step closer to a journey, doesn't it? Just little things like that can take you one step closer to the next step,
Yeah, that's
a good one.
That's a really good one. And it's like totally
so it's not saying assume you're brilliant. Just assume you're better than like half the people going in for this, which is really funny.
It's really funny. And it's like hard to argue with. It's like, come on. Like, come on.
You're going to dress nice.
Yeah.
You care about people. Like those things are valuable.
Yeah,
and guess what? A lot of the candidates, they're not dialed into that.
You know how to say hello. You can listen.
Yes.
You can, right?
You've had a decent education.
Yes.
You can write well.
You're personable. You're pretty. You're 50% good looking.
Yeah.
At least 50% good looking.
Exactly.
I really
decent
like
facial symmetry. You're not unhealthy. You don't smell bad. Those all things build to have.
You can show up on time. Like
you'll be punctual.
That's right. Punctual.
That counts.
It does count. It all matters. And the 50% thing is great because that's 50%. And it's I used to have a teammate, or maybe it was a coach, that was like 20% of the race when you start is already out of the race, because they're basically saying they're mentally not there, or they like already ran the race in their head, or da-da. So even that 20% in a race did mean a lot, but I can't even imagine what it would feel like to have 50% of the people already out of the room.
Yeah.
And that's a really great way to not count yourself out. Right.
Yeah. And if you carry that into like every situation where you're competing for something, it's like it's a decent amount of confidence, isn't it? And it's just enough to get you in there and like, this is worth it.
Yes, this is worth it.
Yeah.
That's the real thing, is like, this is worth it, because we do, so often we step into a situation, think we're not in the game, and it's like, but then you're just wasting, like, give yourself a chance, right? It's a good way to give yourself a fighting chance.
Yeah.
Which is all we should ask of ourselves, because it is out of our control if we get selected for these roles and
job positions, whatever it is. Yeah.
So it's a great way to approach things that are out of your control, to give yourself that good old, that 50% rule. It's a really good one.
It is. It is great, because it's very Midwestern too. It's not super cocky. It's like, come on, dude, you're as good as half the people out there. Just give it a shot, Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
so that was a good one.
Hey guys, Alexi here to tell you about my new favorite shoe from Merrell, the Antora 4. So I've been traveling a lot lately. I went to Japan, Mexico, Chile, Michigan, and I also travel a lot in my mind. But really, the Antora 4s just came out, and I've run multiple marathons in them. I've run on roads, I run on trails, I hiked all over Kyoto in them, just like Scarlett Johansson in Lost in Translation. I think she was wearing Merrell's in the movie. So don't check my work, or what is it? Anyway, they are very cute with skirts, and I've gotten a lot of compliments on the black. And yes, the dirt is real because I actually run in these. The Antora 4s rock. They're comfortable, versatile, and they last a long time. And if you're trail curious, try these guys out because they will turn the trail curious into the trail enthusiast. Antora 4s. For a limited time, we're partnering with Merrell to give you an exclusive offer of 25% off your first purchase using code MentorBuffet25 when you check out on Merrell.com. You can find my favorite Merrell shoes and gear at Merrell.com/Alexi. I'm really getting into that training mode lately. I'm ramping up my volume to the highest it's been in a really long time, but some things have evolved since I was training at a high level. For one, I feel like a completely different person, and also what I put in my body has evolved too. Momentous is one of my ways of taking recovery seriously. I go for the Momentous 3 because it has everything I need: protein, creatine, and omega-3. Expert research shows that most people don't get an adequate amount of any of these nutrients from their diet alone, even when you really eat the rainbow at every meal. So taking these daily will help your brain and your body on a cellular level. I put the protein in my smoothie when I'm moving fast. I got to turn it around quick a lot of these mornings between training and coming to the studio. And I also take the Momentous creatine. It helps with my focus and energy. The Momentous creatine uses CreaPure, which is the purest creatine monohydrate available. In addition to recovery, creatine also helps me focus. All these Momentous products are rigorously tested, backed by science, and use the highest quality ingredients available. That means no gums, fillers, artificial flavors, or sweeteners. Head to livemomentous.com and use code MentorBuffet for 35% off your first subscription. That's code MentorBuffet at livemomentous.com for 35% off your first subscription.
My other high school teacher was this guy, Mr. Lichter, who taught biology. And I forget what he was teaching us. He was teaching us about, I don't know, cell division, mitochondria or something on the cellular level. And he would always enlist class participation, which I loved. And I remember, like, he was the kind of guy that if you could put logic to the answer, like even in class, if I said something, he's like, that's actually not what we're trying to learn, but he's like, that is an interesting point. So he would validate the outside of the box arguments or ideas, and that made me feel good. So even on a test, I wrote, when you have to do a paragraph answer, he's like, I'm going to give you credit for this because it's an interesting idea, but that hasn't been substantiated yet, but it's still interesting.
Wow.
And so that was like validating because it's like, oh, you don't have to just memorize and regurgitate.
Yeah.
If it proves your thinking and there's something valuable in an outside the box idea, I'm going to give you some points for that. And I always liked that about him. I thought that was cool. And it brought me in to the process of like learning biology.
Yeah, I was going to say it's such an unusual way to approach the sciences, which feels so right or wrong and it's so factual and so scary to people like me, Like it's teaching you to think scientifically rather than just know science.
Or your unique talent or point of view is valuable. Like somebody was telling me their teacher in grade school found out they were funny, and every day they got to tell a joke to the class before class started. They would say, so-and-so, come on up here. Do you have a joke for us today? And it made them feel valuable. And it wasn't related to the subject matter, but it was also folding them in, and it was useful to education as well.
That's right. Well, and I guess if we bring in the everything is cumulative thing, then as long as you're like an active, my producer Matt and I always say like an active participant in your life, as long as you're an active participant in your life, everything is contributive anyway. Like there's not your...
Describe what it means to be an active participant in your life. Go.
Okay, an active participant.
This is your next book, I'm sure.
An active participant in your life is someone who takes on their path as if life is just a series of decisions and you just keep making decisions, and you make there's no thought that I'm going to make a mistake. It's just make the best next decision and have agency and make the decision based on everything you know up until like the height of your intelligence, which is an improv term, I think.
It is.
And then if you make a decision and then you realize, oh, I needed to either not make that decision or make a different one, then just make the next one. It's just someone who is like, who is carrying themselves forward in an active way, not waiting, right, for everything to happen to them, and not being so afraid of that the step is going to be a mistake, because that's not that. It's almost the Abbott, like in our movie, that's not a mistake, that's a lesson. It's
that's a great scene.
It's kind of that moment though of basically not being so frazzled by the idea that something could ever be wrong.
Is it also about not falling into the role of victim?
I think so. Yes, that you believe that you have agency and that things are not happening to you. You're stepping into these situations that can be vulnerable too, right? You might be stepping into a dodgeball field and all the balls are going to get thrown on you, but you stepped on the field. And it does make like pain and challenge feel different. Like if you stepped into a situation that might be hard and it is hard, that feels like Alice in Wonderland. It doesn't have to feel like pain, you know? I think about that a lot in running, because sometimes you step into circumstances that are going to hurt, and they usually do, but sensations can feel like, feelings can be sensations and not threats in an actively participating life. And maybe you feel more like, there's a sense of wonder, even if it's hard.
Okay.
I think Matt said it to me when I like said something that I'd done in my life that I thought was like absolutely like stupid and crazy. Like I was like, why did I do that? And he's like, you were actively participating in your life. And I think what he meant was like, you were doing the best you could to do something about the situation. That's what he was saying. You were doing the best you could to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was some like crazy person, but I was like saying it's good that you're a person who makes moves.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, you're a person that makes moves. It was really cool. It made me see myself totally differently because I felt really dumb and silly about something, which we often do feel, I think, when you look back, because you were not that same person. So I've done so many stupid, embarrassing things.
Yeah, we all have.
It's so like, but how do you have to negotiate that person with you, and you're still living with them, and you can't just like squash and shame every past version of yourself because you know better.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we do have to like have some relationship to our past selves that makes us feel proud of ourselves, not just ashamed.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
I don't know.
Well, it's giving yourself grace too, because if we're all part of that human thing, then it's the other side of you're as good as half of the people.
Yeah.
Just imagine like half the people are fuck ups like you.
That's right.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like everybody has those moments where they were idiots, or, you know, and you want to learn from them, and it's not apologizing for like not being the best person in certain situations, or making amends to people that you did hurt, or that is, you have to take agency and ownership of things you've done. Mm-hmm. But you can also give yourself grace and go like, well, I don't know. I know other people have done this shit. Like, I'm not the only idiot in the world. So I guess I'll just let go of it if I can.
Yeah.
You know?
It's almost like accepting like, I am a human. Like this, like I'm a part. It's almost like you're a part of something, because right?
We're kind of like, we're not built perfectly.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah. I don't have the whiteboard like you though. I don't have the plan of like.
You don't?
No.
So what do you think? How do you think about your life now?
I try to be better about it. Like that's an area of growth for me, to be more forward thinking, you know, because I have kids who need college money, and I have like, you know, responsibilities. So I've gotten by necessity to be more like, look at the calendar. But for much of my life, I was just like this, like.
You were improvising your life? Sorry.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But that's cool. I mean,
yes and no, not really. I've gotten better as with age, I've gotten better at like being more responsible and more forward thinking and more planning. You know, I used to get completely freaked out by the calendar. It just felt like I was being penned in, and I would be overly like upset if I missed an appointment or something like that. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Tease out the difference between being so comfortable improvising on a stage and being so uncomfortable with a life that's improvised.
Like I have people in my life that will be like, they'll call me and like, dude, we should go to like Ireland 9 months from now and we should like do a vacation. And I'll be like, I can't, it overwhelms me.
Yeah.
It overwhelms me. And I don't know what that is. Like, this is like something I should talk to my shrink about, but I have that instinct of like, oh no, there's gonna be something on the calendar and it'll take up mental space. I'll give it too much, even though it's in the future.
Yeah.
I'll think about it. I'm like, am I, I'll overly think, am I prepared to go to that trip to Ireland? Am I,
Well, let's unpack it. Okay, a question that I was taught by these like amazing sports psychologists is when I was like in a situation where I was like, I don't understand. I have a feeling that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Like I would just like this. And they would ask me this question. I think it's changed my life because it's such a good question. They would say, what's the worst part about it? So what's the worst part about you putting an event in the calendar for November?
That it's something I'll end up being unprepared for. That we're going to require a ton of work of like getting airline tickets, getting hotel stuff. Like there's a workload associated with that calendar date.
Okay.
And that I may space it, or I may let people down. Like I may like, dude, you didn't get your visa. You can't go to Ireland, idiot.
Okay. And what's the worst part about that? Because basically the exercise is like you keep going
finding
under
the worst part of that.
Yeah, like if and if that's the bottom layer that you let people down, then that's it. But like sometimes
the irrational part of me thinks I won't be able to execute all those steps to make the trip happen.
And then what's the worst part about that? Like if you got there and all these things, what's the worst part about that?
The worst part about that is to disappoint those other people who were relying on me to show up to that thing.
And what's the worst part about disappointing them?
The worst part of disappointing that. Am I going to cry at the end of this?
No, it's just helpful because
the worst part about disappointing them is that it could change the nature of our relationship moving forward. Like they won't invite me on trips anymore, or they'll be inclined to not include me on stuff or not trust me with stuff.
And maybe that you'll be like alone. They'll abandon you, something like that. I don't mean this.
Well,
I'm not trying to.
I guess if you kept going and going, I guess you would. But
it's not rational.
Depending on who those people are, if it's family, I know I won't lose them.
Yeah, but these are friends.
If it's my brothers, but if it was friends, I guess would I lose? It would change like.
It's not.
Yeah, I guess you would lose that relationship. Sure.
It's not that you would really. The point here is not that you would really lose it. That's the point about this whole thing is that like when we really play it to the worst fear, usually we're like, that's ridiculous. Or okay, now that I know that that's my fear, I'm going to like plan the trip and tell them, hey guys, like I actually have a fear that I won't be able to get all my shit together. And just like the point is that like, if it were to be true, you can like navigate it or express it. And oftentimes the worst fear is irrational. And so, but the surface level fear, if you only start at like level 1 or level 2, like you said, might actually feel true because that is what's bringing on the feeling. And it's been so helpful to me because we get in our own way, right? And and then we don't do those things but we're not even in touch with what the reason is. We think, because it's, right? You think it's the planning and all this stuff, but it's really like they'll all abandon me and even just expressing it is like it's hard because we don't slow down to get to that lower level. But usually when you get to the bottom, it can actually release it, or you can figure out that it wasn't. That's kind of adorable to have that fear. Or you're like, wow, I actually like really value adorable. It is adorable. It's
Wow.
adorable. Or you really value your friendships and you like it's a meaningful thing. It's not a bad thing. It's actually really cool that you care that you're a good dude to these friends of yours and that you can be reliable and that you're there. So anyway, we went down a rabbit hole, but
no, it's interesting to think about. I think part of it is too, like, I think I would be exposed as like incompetent or an idiot. Like, dude can't even get a visa to go to Ireland. Like, what's wrong with that guy? He's not a grown up, you know?
Which has to do with your whole, like, which I feel too, of like wanting to just like be able to contribute and stand on your own 2 feet.
Yes.
It is so rare for me to be freshman at something and, to be honest, bad at a sport. But I really love those opportunities to try something new, and I feel most comfortable when I'm doing it in a fun environment with somebody who feels like a real teammate. Joe, the founder of Go Brewing, is awesome. Go Brewing in every way represents his ethos. It's about optimistically pursuing a healthy dream, and we did this fitness competition in Las Vegas together called High Rocks, and we were not the worst people there. And we never left each other's sides in the running portion, partially because it's against the rules, but also because we were having so much fun. Go Brewing has not only become a staple in my day, but has also helped color the way I see my life right now, which is full of flavor and balance. The beers have real fruit and are about 50 calories each. Right now, I love the New School Sour and the Salty AF Chilada. It's refreshing and salty and has a little lime flavor. You've got to try it out. Visit gobrewing.com/Alexi and I'll add my favorites to your cart. You'll even get 15% off your first order. Here's to new friends, shared experiences, and unforgettable moments. It's very good.
Sometimes it's like, I remember with UCB, I was in charge of bringing props to this shoot. We had a promo shoot in LA, so we flew from New York to LA, and I was responsible for bringing the UCB clothing. Like, we had these outfits, and so halfway across the country, in the middle of the country, I had this moment of like, oh no, I forgot them. So we had,
I know that's feeling.
So we had no pants. Like, so we had these outfits that were just shirts, and then we wore swim trunks, which was kind of funny. But
well, when you're on a movie set, you're like set. Like, they're like, you be in the chair at this time. We have all the food for you.
We have no responsibility whatsoever.
Being on production is so awesome. I feel so amazing. They coddle
us like babies.
Well, they coddle you, but also like you feel like you're in the place you belong. Like, you're like, I know I'm meant to be here and nowhere else. Yeah. And I love that feeling. Yeah. I love the feeling of being exactly where I belong and being certain that that's where I belong.
Yeah.
It feels so good. And of course, not having to deal with the logistics of where's the breakfast coming from or
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it is. If I'm put in charge of something that's not my expertise, you know, beyond interpreting a character and being funny and helping pitch jokes, and I don't know, there's a few things I'm good at, writing. Yeah, those would be the equivalent of like, don't know your password for me.
Yeah, I get it. I think that's why you've worked very well with your like known challenges then. Like, I don't know, they say this about like ADD people where it's like, you can hyperfocus and you can't, you know, there's certain things that are like your strengths essentially.
Yeah.
And so even if you don't know a diagnosis, to just start to sense your strengths and weaknesses and lean in and find career paths and find friends and environments that like elevate what you feel really strong in is such our task in the world, in addition to figuring out what we're passionate about, right?
Yeah, and I think delegating is key. Like, I've directed a couple things, you know, like improvised movies, and that is very challenging because everybody comes to you like, what do you think of this? Is this the right color? Is that? And that's a kind of like, that is kind of a nightmare scenario for me because it's responsibility for everything. So learning to delegate to department heads and trust people is how I navigate that. And also understanding the smaller or more hyper-focused I can make my responsibilities, the better. So the next film I direct will be like 4 actors, I guarantee you.
In one house.
In one house, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm writing a book and I have an assistant.
Oh, great.
And so I'm doing, it's related to the UCB comedy scene. I'm interviewing people who came through that place, what they learned and what they went on and how they used it in their life.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So,
that's
but
so
that's
special.
like a lot of interviews and a lot of organizing and a lot of appointments
Yes.
and so I knew right away, like I need an assistant and I need to lean on her and not feel guilty about leaning on her. The sort of aw shucks Midwestern humility that I was, raised in and sort of live similarly still comes into conflict in an industry where you have to kind of brag about yourself, simply put. And so I have learned to, not loudspeaker my accomplishments, but to accept them and to not hide them and to accept my accomplishments and to be proud of them more publicly. And that is counterintuitive to how I was raised. And so that's been a journey of like, nobody wants to hang out with somebody who's always talking about how great they are. But by the same token, it is interesting if you have done interesting things, if you've accomplished interesting things, if you've done interesting things, you can put that out there in the way that, like, I don't know. If I own 2 pizza restaurants in Chicagoland, I'd be like, doing pretty good. I got one in Elmhurst and I got one up in Evanston. I mean, life's good.
I love
That's not terrible.
No, it's like,
but I had to learn that, and I'm still learning that.
Yeah, it's like thinking about your accomplishments as more like credentials. Like a doctor has, doctor has credentials on the wall, and that's not weird. That gives people confidence, right? And people should have confidence in you. But what if they don't know that you X, Y, or Z?
Yeah,
and in an industry that's so mental, right? Like it is a lot about energy and it is so energy, confident, forward. And if you really know you have the stuff to back it, right? You're not just smoke and mirrors. I think people appreciate knowing about that, and they appreciate being by your side, like being teammates with you.
Yeah.
They like it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's a way of registering with people too, and not just disappearing on the back wall.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's like holding your ground in any situation.
Yeah.
Being present, but not like being timid. Just like, I'm here and whatever you want to talk about. And yes, I won't hide any, I won't hide away from any praise if you want to praise me, I guess.
Well, Matt, I feel so grateful to have you on Mentor Buffet. That was the coolest thing ever, because I could not have I could not have predicted any of that.
Yeah.
And the wisdom from your high school community and just like the way just talking to you understand more about how you see the world and how you approach the world. And it's this like, it's a beautiful balance of like agency and like awe and reverence and understanding of yourself that seems really fun, because it seems to like both recognize what you are and also like allow you to become anything, right, as you are with your characters. And I don't know, I'm grateful to be friends with you. I am.
I'm grateful to be here. It's been a joy.
Cool. If you're enjoying Mentor Buffet, follow Voicing Change for more inspirational and truly life-affirming content from shows like Soul Boom, The Proof, Feel Better, Live More, and the Rich Roll podcast. Just go to voicingchange.media. That's voicingchange.media for a beautiful selection of productive and positive shows.